Hello, this is a tutorial on how to create graphs based off of the data that is produced by a Google form, and then how to take those graphs and insert them into a Google Slides presentation. So first of all, if I go to my form, in this case in the presentation I'm going to be showing, I have two different forms, the data from which I need to put together into one presentation. So I'm going to need to open up the Google Sheets documents for both of those different forms. Now the way that I do that is if I go to the primary form here, for example, if I click on responses, in the upper right hand corner you'll see that you have this option, view responses in Sheets. And if I click on this, then I'm going to have the spreadsheets that gives me the answers for every single one of these problems, or every one of the questions. So down here they produce their own graphs, but the colors can be arbitrary and you may want to present it in your own way or filter data out in a particular way. So for example, if I were to click on this button and I go to this sheet, every one of these columns is a different question. And so in order for me to create my own graphs based off of each one of these questions, and let's say that I had two forms that I'm creating graphs for to put into one presentation, then I need to make sure I have the sheets open for both of the forms that I'm going to include. So for example, I have the Google Sheets for the primary form here and the Google Sheets form for the secondary survey here. And I got this just by going to the Google form for high school and pressing on the same button. So I have these two Google Sheets. Now you'll notice that I already have this done, but I'm going to show you how to make the graphs that are on here. And generally when I'm making one of these presentations, I will reuse a former presentation to get an idea of the orientation of where graphs are going to be and what kind of size I want those graphs to be. So just to show for question number one, what I would do here is if I were, let's say, to delete this one for primary, then if I go to the primary sheet, what I want to do, this is question number one, this is the first one I'm making a graph for. I want to click on the first response, then scroll all the way down to the bottom, hold Shift, and then click on the bottom, and that will select the whole data set. Once I've done that, for question number one, I want to press Insert and Chart. Now when I do this, it will automatically go to pie chart usually, but if you need to change that, you can change that here. And if you don't get the option for pie chart, that means that there's something wrong with your data. For example, if you had everybody answer one question in a particular way, like they all selected the same option, you may not get pie chart there. And so what you need to do is add some response to the bottom of the column that is different from the other ones, and then insert your chart. And then once you have your chart created here, you can delete that response and it will be reflected, that change will be reflected in the graph. But in this case, I have plenty of different responses here. So once I've created my chart, in the upper right hand side, if I go to Customize, I can change a bunch of different stuff about this chart. Now in this case, if you look here, I just wanted the title of each of these graphs, because I have the question up here, to show whether it's coming from primary or whether it's coming from secondary. So in here, all I need to do is change that to what I want. So in this case, I'm going to put primary. And then over here, I have the options. Once I started editing this, the options for it showed up. And generally, I'll just put that in bold. I'll put it to the center, works kind of like a document. And I'll change the text to black or keep it as a dark gray. It doesn't, that's based off of preference, but let's say I make it black. Then the next thing that I want to do is go to where it says pie chart. Now I have a couple options here, but generally the one that I put to show percentages is I will click on this, press percentage, and press bold, and press black, just so I can see it. But if you wanted to, you can modify the size to make it easier to see. You just want to remember what values you put in so that all of your graphs are standardized and they all look the same. So once I've done this, I have my percentages here. If I go back to chart style, I also have this option called 3D, and I just think that it makes the graph look a little bit nicer, but again, that's based off of preference. So if I click on 3D, then I'm going to see that side angle and a 3D version of the chart. Going down to the next option, pie slice, this is where I can change the colors that I have here. And I like to have a consistent color theme throughout the different graphs that I'm putting into a presentation. So in this case, generally I make the best response green, and I can make it a neon green, but you can really choose whatever color you want. So I make that bright green. The next best thing, I make a yellow. The third best thing, I make an orange. And the most negative option, I make a red. And that's just so that all of your graphs quickly reflect any sort of changes or differences there might be between primary and secondary, or whatever you're showing for your different graphs, but that's readily apparent, which isn't necessarily true of the other summary that you get in Google Forms. So I like to be consistent with that. And sometimes if there are more options, I need to select other colors to add in, but in general, that's the color scheme that I use. Then the final thing I need to do down here where it says legend, if I click on that, again, instead of it being around the sides here, this is again preference, but I just, to make it look a little bit cleaner, because this is never going to be able to show everything that those percentages reflect. Where it says position, I'll press bottom. So you'll see they all go on the bottom here now. And then I press bold and I change the color to black to make it a little bit easier to see. Now, I have my graph here. And if I were to press Control-C, it's going to copy this graph and I can paste it into the presentation. However, one thing I like to do, because sometimes there are errors in copying this, which could become a problem later on when we're doing multiple graphs, I like to click out of the graph, then click on it, and press Control-C. Now when I do this, it's going to copy it, but you're going to see that the blue line around this disappears if it was effectively copied. So I'm going to press Control-C, and you can see that that blue line went away. And that's reflecting that it was actually copied and that I'm not, for example, just about to paste an older graph that I made into the presentation. So now if I go to the presentation, right here, I'm going to paste this, and I don't want to link it to the spreadsheet because the spreadsheet might be changed or altered and that'll affect your graphs. So I can press paste unlinked unless you want this to be something that's a live presentation where you know that the numbers are going to be changing a lot. But I'm going to paste it unlinked so that it's going to stay the way that it is. And one thing I like to do up here is to add a border, which you can see around this one. So I'm going to add a border, and I'm going to go for a 2-point. And now I want to make sure that this graph is the same size as this graph. Now if I move this corner right here, I'm going to see when this graph is the exact same size as this graph, because I'm going to see on the x-axis here and on the y-axis here, there are blue indicator lines to show me when it's lined up. So if I pull this out or back in, you'll see that when I go right here, that I have a blue line both on the y-axis on the side and on the x-axis. That's telling me that they're the same size. So once I get there, I let go, and now they're the same size. Then I want to make sure that this is centered, that it's aligned properly and looks nice. So if I drag this down, you'll see that red line appear. That's letting me know that the two pictures are centered horizontally. But if I want to make sure that they're also centered vertically in here, I can move this to the right, and you'll see that it lines up there, that red line on the left-hand side. It lines up with the title, which in this case is where I want it to be. But you can also decide, let's say you had 4 graphs on here, you can use these lines to help orient where you put the graphs. So if I take this and put it there, then click out, you can see that this looks like it did before. So the two graphs match in terms of what the colors mean. Then I can do the exact same thing for secondary. So let's say I were to delete this. When I go to secondary, and I do the same question, so I click here to make sure I'm at the first question there. And you'll notice I already have a graph here from when I was making before, so I'm going to delete that. I go to the first response here, and then I go to the bottom, press Shift and click. I have the whole data set selected there. Then again, I press Insert, Chart, and it gives me the chart here. Remember, I wanted this title to say secondary. So I have that there. Then I can put it in bold, same thing I did last time, center it, make it black. Again, try to be consistent so they all look the same. You have a nice clean design. Then again, just going into different order this time, if I press on chart style, I want to click that 3D option. In pie chart, this is where I add the percentages. Now you'll notice there's also a value thing here. The value tells you how many people selected a certain option. Sometimes that can be interesting instead of percentage. But generally we're looking at percentages, so click on percentage. make that bold, and make sure that it is black. So now you can see I did the exact same thing for this graph. Then I go to the pie slice. I want to change my colors like I did before. So this one, strongly agree, the best is green. Next one is yellow. And strongly disagree wasn't orange, it was red. So you have to remember what those different slices were. And then finally I go to legend. I put that on the bottom, bold, and black. Now that I'm done, remember I click out, then I click on the graph, and I press Control-C, and I should see that blue line disappear. See it disappear there. Go here, press Control-V. I want to paste it unlinked. And then I can click on this border weight, press 2 again to stay consistent, and then check this to make sure that it's lined up on both axes. And I can see both of those lines both on the bottom and on the side. Let go, and then I just drag this so it's aligned there, and then put it here so it's aligned vertically as well. You can see the red line on the right hand side. Now sometimes that can be tricky. It's working for me because I had these, I'm aligning them with this title, but you just kind of have to play with it a little bit to get it aligned. And actually you can see this one is not perfectly aligned there, so I aligned it a little bit differently. But anyway, you can see that I did that for every single one of these. Now one thing that's nice, but it can be a little bit confusing, is once I've gotten done with one of these, for example, in my chart, if I wanted to, I could click on one of these columns and I could change the color of that column to some color to indicate that I've done that column already, that I've already produced that graph. And one thing that can save you a little bit of time, if you wanted to, you can make each graph individually. So once you're done, you paste that in the presentation, you can delete this and get rid of it. But one thing that can kind of expedite this, so you don't have to do all of the settings every single time, is if I click up here on these 3 little buttons and press Edit Chart, it's going to show me what the range is here. So I have B2 to B38, so it's letting me know that's where I'm getting my data set. If I wanted to, I can just change the data set here. So for the next question, I don't want B2 to B38, I want C2 to C38. So if I were to change this, click on this right-hand side, and I want to put a different range. So C2 to C38. Now, if I do this, that is now what my data set's going to be. So you can see that it changed. So it's different values now. And one thing that you need to be careful of, in this case, I don't need to change any of the settings. But sometimes when you use this option to make every new one, it does make it faster because you don't need to do a lot of the same settings again. But sometimes you can mess the colors up. So if you decided, I don't want to make a new graph every single time, I want to reuse the same graph and just change these values, then you want to check and make sure the colors are okay. So in this case, they are. So I have green is strongly agree, yellow is agree, orange is disagree, and red is strongly disagree. Then once I've done that, I click on it, press Control-C, you can see the blue line went away. I go here to question number 2, and I've just made that graph. We can put it here again, press Control-V, paste unlinked, give it a border, make sure that it's the same size, align it, and we're done. So that's another way that I can do the exact same thing. And that can greatly save the amount of time that it takes you to do something like this. So that's just in general how you make graphs and how you can put them into a presentation. And that's what I did for every single one of these. And what I did was I just went through and I changed this value, the data range, which I do again by clicking this, and I can change it here and press OK. I just did that, and then I didn't need to waste as much time adding those same settings every single time and remembering the same settings every single time. But the only caveat there is that you need to make sure that you're on the right column, because you might be creating a graph for the wrong question, which is why I might color these after I'm done. So I got done with this one, so I could change that color to green to indicate that I already finished that. So I know that the next question, my range isn't going to be C, it's going to be D. That's where you can double check it. And it can save you a lot of time for doing that. So I need to do the same thing. In this case, I have 2 different forms. So I'm creating a graph for question 1 on the primary form, and then the same thing for secondary. And again, for secondary, I already made graph for question 1. So I can just keep the exact same settings, press edit chart, and just change my data range here from B, which was question number 1, to C for question number 2. And just continue on with that until I get every response that I want. And this is also one of the reasons why you want to make sure that these forms are bilingual, because if you have 2 different languages in here, then what you need to do is you need to take the responses and you need to make them bilingual in order to combine the data. Otherwise, the sheet isn't going to understand what you want to do. It's going to look at them all as completely different options instead of looking at a Spanish and an English version as the same type of data. And so as a result of that, you'll get English and Spanish versions within the same pie chart as separate options, and you don't want that. So that's why it's better for it to be bilingual, and to do as much as you can to make sure that you don't need to actually organize this data. For other types of charts, you may need to organize that data depending on the type of question you have. So if it isn't bilingual and if it isn't multiple choice, then you may need to move this data around a little bit in order for you to be able to make the graphs. But other than that, that's basically all you need to do. And if you start to work on this and you run into any issues, let me know, and we can work on that together. But anyway, good luck, and I hope this was helpful.